you still have to have the same kind of structure and rigor around data that you need to have over the last few decades to make anything with AI work for you.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook presented by PDQ, Pretty Damn Quick and Details Interactive. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 144, and my guest is Matt Ezyk. Let me ask you this. If you were building an e-commerce business from scratch today, would you still choose a traditional platform like Shopify, or would you build something entirely different? That's exactly what we're getting into today. I'm joined by Matt, who's the head of e-commerce engineering at Hanna Andersson, someone who's worked across both the vendor side and the brand side with experience at companies like CVS, Dunkin', and Pet Supermarket. In this conversation, Matt breaks down why he chose a composable tech stack using Salesforce and Vercel, how that unlocks faster testing and experimentation, and what most brands get wrong when it comes to scaling their digital experience. We also get into how to actually evaluate vendors in a world full of noise, why site speed and data quality are still the biggest levers for growth, and where AI fits in versus where it's overhyped. And maybe most importantly, Matt shares how to build teams and cultures that are comfortable testing, learning, and even failing, because that's where real growth happens. This is one of those episodes where you'll walk away with a few ideas you'll want to implement right away. And before we get started, a quick thank you as always to Max Brandstetter of the Wow Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook Podcast. Today I'm joined by Matt Ezyk. Matt has decades of experience building, scaling, and leading digital commerce technology and strategy at some of the world's most innovative companies. Matt serves as head of e-commerce engineering at Hanna Andersson, a leading direct-to-consumer premium children's apparel and lifestyle brand. Prior to joining Hanna Andersson, he led digital at Pet Supermarket, overseeing product and engineering. Additionally, he served as Director of Functional Architecture and Director of PMO at Rafter One, with operational oversight of teams working with iconic brands like Skechers and L.L. Bean. Matt also served in progressive leadership roles at Accenture, Merkle, and several startups working with hundreds of global brands like Uniqlo, Disney, Revlon, Tapestry, and many more. Matt brings to retailers and D2C brands a deep expertise in developing and implementing diverse end-to-end commerce strategies. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark, happy to be here.
Thanks for joining. We have been a long time LinkedIn buddies and appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. You have a very different background than many of the guests that I have, one that kind of has an intersection of technology and marketing. So really excited to talk to you. But like we do in all of our shows, we try to get the first story from our guest, where you grew up, your background, and anything in that upbringing that might have suggested you'd have the career type that you've had.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very small farm town in Massachusetts called Rehoboth. Most people don't know it. And I think like a lot of the friends I had growing up, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that I loved technology. When I was 10, I built my first computer and became really fascinated by understanding like how it worked and how it all came together, not just the hardware, but the systems, the software, and obviously the internet. So around the time I was in high school, that was the coming of age of e-commerce. We saw that with Amazon first. That really fascinated me. Watching businesses move online was really interesting. I just had no idea it would eventually become my career. I just knew I wanted to do something with technology. So looking back, I think that curiosity about technology and systems is what really just naturally led me in that direction. It's been great.
Go back to the early part of your career. You go to university. Where'd you go to school?
I went to University of Rhode Island.
Okay. And you come out of Rhode Island, you're looking for a job. What's the first thing that you do out of school?
Yeah, so I actually was an AE, account executive. I got a job at a company in Rhode Island called Tower Stream, and I was selling a product that no one heard of from a technology that no one heard of, and certainly no one had heard of me. And I think sales is such a great primer for any career. It taught me that really every product or technology decision ultimately has to tie back to customer value. And when you're in sales, you see directly what customers care about, what they're willing to pay for, and that was a grind. And it's also great for relationship building. I was really hyper focused on just giving value to the people I was talking to. I pull from that experience every day of my life. It was so valuable to me.
It's interesting, and I was going to talk about this in the context of Hanna Andersson, but since you talked about it now in sales and bringing value, so you're sitting on the other side of the table today. You're working in a brand, and we'll go back to earlier in your career. You get approached by salespeople. What resonates for you in the outreach?
I think if they do the things that I remember doing when I was in that seat, right? Like when I had cold outreach, especially, I wanted to make sure I knew as much as I could about the person I was reaching out to and their company. And I find that's very rare nowadays, right? Like I actually even had someone at Shop Talk come up to me and was talking to me, and they're like, what does Hannah Anderson do? And I told them, and then they're telling me, they're like, oh, my family loves Hannah Anderson. But I'm like, well, you didn't know what it was 30 seconds ago. So it's like an authentic voice of just really understanding who they are as much as you can and the problem that you can solve for them. And if you're confident in that and you know what you're talking about and you know their business, then you just have so much more of a chance of success.
So once you hear that story and you make your decision of whether you're going to give this person a little bit more time, as you entertain their conversations, and let's assume you decide you want to do something, how does it make its way to, and it doesn't have to just be at Hannah, but how does it make its way on your roadmap? Right, because we all go into a year, a quarter, whatever it is, with this list of product of things we want to produce and execute, and there's never room for something new, usually. How does something make its way onto your roadmap?
Yeah, I think if a vendor can clearly articulate a problem that we have and they have clear evidence of measurable results, I think that's a great start. And again, like authenticity and honesty, right? Like if we can have an honest discussion about what it will take to implement, I think that's an area that a lot of vendors get tripped up on, right? Like how much of my team's time will this take really? Like I hear all the time, like, yeah, we can install it in 15 minutes. No, don't worry about it. It's no problem. But I'm, especially on the engineering side, thinking like my team bandwidth and how is it going to affect site speed and all these things that are very important to me. If we start there and I know this can solve a problem and we can test it and learn from it early, that's a great start.
You talk about measurement, that's another, one of these things, so many vendors that I have, had sit in front of me, they talk about, well, we're going to generate this amount of revenue for you or what have you. They oftentimes forget about incrementality and the measurement of incrementality and then the measurement of the ROI. How do you help them address that, or should they be addressing it on their own?
I think both, right? Like they need to know specifically how we look at it at our business and how we measure it. And every business is different and every vendor is different of what they're trying to improve. Let's say it's like conversion. We have a very methodical approach to do that where we'll build a POC and then we'll test against the control. And I've also built a technology stack that allows us to test and learn very easily. And that's, I think, really crucial in modern commerce stacks is to be able to do that because there's, especially in the age of AI, there's going to be tools that come out a couple months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now that are going to be really interesting to us or many other brands that we want to test. And if you don't have that baseline to be able to go and test and learn, then you're putting yourself at a disadvantage and without that flexibility.
I have so many questions around tech stack that are interesting to me as a marketer. We'll give you the opportunity to talk about what you've built. But as you build this tech stack, I've seen all too often these stacks become Frankenstein. You keep adding to them and adding to them, and how do you try to avoid that from happening? Is it in the architecture up front? Is it being thoughtful about what you add? How do you avoid that?
Yeah, I look at it from a flexibility perspective, right? Like this tech stack should enable the business to experiment fast, right? It should be very flexible. So the technology, and I think a lot of technologists understand this, but maybe they don't think about it from a marketer's perspective. I kind of look at myself as a marketer trapped in a technologist body because I try to have that lens as much as possible. So as a marketer, I want my tech stack to be really flexible, and I want to look at things that are going to drive my KPIs that I care about and be able to test them, right? So from a technology perspective, that means for me, building a platform that's API first, I can plug in the best in breed tech that's out there, whether that's something that exists now or in the future. My front end is flexible, right? I can change things around, move content around, and then again, the systems are designed for experimentation. Like that's such a key point. You have to test, learn. Sometimes you fail, then it's okay to fail, right? That means you're learning, right? And if you're not doing that, you're not growing.
There's school of thought. You're this scrappy startup environment. You want to be first to market, you want to be fast to market, and some will be willing to put new feature and function out where it's 60 or 70% right. Then there's the school of thought that says, look, we need to put something out that's 95% right, and using air quotes right, so that the thought is, if you put it out at 95% and it doesn't work, at least you know that it wasn't your execution. Maybe it just wasn't a good idea for your customer. How do you think about being ready to put something to market?
I take the MVP approach with almost everything that I look at, right? So good to me. If you're just looking at a commerce platform, for example, the site's fast, the nav is simple, checkout and is fast, personalization is relevant and easy. There's consistency across channels. If you have all that, then it makes sense to launch it and get the learnings from it, from your analytics when it's out live and customers are using it. I think almost every time you're going to gain so much understanding and learning from getting something out there than waiting to get it perfect. We took that approach here at Hanna when we built our new commerce site. So I did it in a very different way where normally you build the site and then it takes, 6 months, 9 months, a year, or sometimes longer, and then you launch it. We did it component based where for example, we built our checkout and launched it of April 25. If we had done it the old way, I wouldn't have got that live until now, April 26th. So we saw all that benefit throughout the whole year, right? So, and we learned what we needed to do differently and we made incremental changes. So you're missing out on that learning if you just don't get an MVP out the door.
Static checkouts are costing you money. Every shopper sees the same offers and too many walk away. That's why Shopify's fastest growing brands use PDQ, Pretty Damn Quick, the checkout segmentation platform. PDQ personalizes the checkout experience by creating tailored flows for each customer segment, whether they're first-time buyers, high spenders, or returning VIPs. Their platform runs ongoing A/B tests, automatically sets the best performing experience, and keeps optimizing for higher conversion and AOV. The result? More completed checkouts, less abandonment, and millions in uplift. Discover your brand's optimal checkout with PDQ at prettydamnquick.com. We'll come back to the Hanna situation and what you built out there, but let me take you back to, we digressed a bit on some interesting things. You talked about being an AE to start. So follow me quickly through your career after the AE, and you were on a lot of provider side before you made the leap into the brand side.
Yeah, so I worked for a couple brands actually early in my career after the AE time, and that was mostly in technology, like coding servers and things like that. I worked for CVS and Dunkin' brands. I got an opportunity to join a site integrator in commerce that worked with demandware, and I've always been fascinated by commerce and was just interested in breaking into it and got that role. It was a small startup. I think I was employee 8 or 9. We grew it to over 100 people. And then I went to join another startup. I think I was employee 4 or 5, like a smaller one. And I've gone on to different larger companies like Accenture, PFS Web, which became Merkle. And then during that time, I've worked for, I don't know, probably over 100 brands, right? And I just was really fascinated about the what goes on inside a brand, and a lot of the work I ended up doing on the SI side was strategy, right? So I would often sit on site with them and learn the ins and outs. I really had a desire to go to the brand side. I got that opportunity in 22 where I went to a brand called Pet Supermarket, which is mainly in the Florida area. It has like 230 brick and mortar stores and online in a technology engineering focused role. We didn't have a e-commerce business lead or really a business at all. It was just a very old way of like having the merchandising and marketing teams just kind of flow things out to the site. So I pitched the idea to our C-suite to say like, hey, if we want this channel to grow, we need someone to sit in the driver's seat and drive it. And by the way, I want to do that. And they gave me that opportunity. So that's how I ended up in that hybrid role, owning, engineering, product, marketing, merchandising. Afterwards I get this great opportunity to join an iconic brand like Hanna, leading customer facing engineering technology, the type of work, and it's been really great.
You talked early on about an engineer, a technologist trapped in a marketing body, or vice versa. I forget how exactly you phrased it, but you do have that interesting match of technology and marketing. How is that a help, and is it sometimes a hindrance?
I think it almost always will be a help because I feel like I understand why decisions are being made and how I can help my partners in marketing better with that lens. I also try to disseminate that information and that viewpoint down to my teams, which I think is really important. I knew when I was an IC, there were a lot of times where I worked on things and projects where I didn't really understand why they were funded or why we were working on them. And in some cases, I got that context and it made my work just more valuable and interesting and enjoyable. And so I try to do that to my teams now. I say, like, hey, we move this item up in the roadmap. That's because we feel like we're going to get this incrementality or this kind of lift in conversion of AOV. And we want to do that now versus later. So that way they're working on the projects and they're like, oh, yeah, Matt told me why we're doing this. And I get it now.
That's really important. You talked about MVP, putting out, a most viable product. Are there some learnings along your way, along your career that, you did something like that and it really stood out as something that you thought was going to work and it didn't?
I think there are times when you implement features or a vendor and like you conceptually understand it and you're sold on it. Or there were certainly times where I did that for a brand from another vendor on the SI side and it didn't work. And the most of the time the reason it didn't work is because there was a communications gap of like why we're this really intersects with what I was just talking about. Why we're investing in this, why we're doing it now, what is it going to do for us, what are the impacts and benefits to the team. I felt that as an IC when leaders did that with me. And then also there are times where I thought that we all understood why we're doing certain things, and then, but there were the people in the org that didn't. So the adoption was low, and we just didn't get the value that we should have got from it, right? So I really, and over the last 5 years especially, have been very laser focused at making sure that every single stakeholder that may touch what we're doing has a understanding of when, why, and how we're doing it.
Many brands, in my experience, have difficulty acknowledging a mistake. Maybe they buy something off the shelf, they implement it, they do their analysis, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. They have a hard time ripping it out and saying, all right, we tried it, it didn't work. Have you experienced that? And what counsel would you give to brands if they did make a mistake?
That goes back to the test and learn, right? Like the part of the test and learn philosophy is that you will make mistakes, right? And that's okay. I think having a culture of being able to make a mistake is really important because you're learning from it. So the issue comes when you don't, like you said, you don't move on from that. So I think just understanding that when you're testing something, it may not work, and that's okay. And we need to move on from it. So if, especially like in a POC, right, whether it's a new UX strategy or if it's a new tool, or in our case, we launched a new checkout and tested it. We launched a new cart and tested it. If it doesn't work, we need to move on. No hard feelings, no love lost. I think when you're not saying that out loud, people feel like, oh, we can't make a mistake, so they take longer to try to fix it or figure out like why, and you just have to move on.
How do you build a culture where it's okay to make mistakes? We all, not all, but many people are not feeling like they're empowered to make mistakes along the way.
I think it's being honest and vulnerable. Like I'm honest and vulnerable with my mistakes that I've made in my career. Everybody makes mistakes. And really, like what I was just talking about is understanding that the learning from the mistakes that you're making when you come to like a test and learn environment is so valuable that it's okay, right? Like if you're not doing that, you're not going to grow. If you're not trying new things, you're not. It's impossible to expect that every single thing you do is going to be a hit. But if you're not trying things, then you're not going to grow. And I think once my teams understood that and understood my philosophy around that, they have a comfort level with it, and it made them more adventurous into saying like, hey, I want to try this new tactic with reviewing pull requests in our code or doing this and doing that. It's showing that vulnerability first, and then I think that culture builds and spreads.
All right, so let's talk about Hanna Andersson. For those that don't know the brand, give us a quick overview.
Yeah, so we're a 43-year-old children's apparel and lifestyle brand. We act like a startup. I think a lot of times we're very lean, but I like that. We're known for our quality of our clothes. It's a really fun brand to go like out in public in a conference, and a lot of the moms just love our brand, and we're universally loved. So we have great products for kids, infant to age 12. We also are the pioneers of the Christmas family pajamas. We pioneered that in the 80s, actually. We are almost entirely direct to consumer, pure play online. You may find us in some baby boutiques. We also have a resale program too, with a marketplace where you can buy and sell our products because the quality is so good they last a really long time.
Hanna Me Downs still a thing?
That is it. Yeah, it's a clever name, but it worked really well.
Yeah, I know the business. I started my career in the catalog space, and Hanna got its start, I believe, in catalog. Is there still a direct mail vehicle that you guys use?
No, I think that was sunsetted before the private equity time many decades ago. But yeah, I mean, that was king, as you know, back 80s, 90s, 2000s, and that's how we grew.
All right, so talk about your role. Interesting title, and then I want to talk a little bit about. All right, you've been there X time now. What have you done?
I like to look at my role as like leading the technology that is customer facing for the most part, right? So anything technical with the e-commerce site, which is like 99% of our business. So that is the maintenance and deployment of our new commerce site that I referenced, and then all the ancillary technologies and teams that work in it and around it, and that all falls in my domain.
When you start in a business and things have changed over time, it used to be geez, if you're going to need a platform, you go to IBM, and the quote was, you don't get fired for selecting IBM. And if you're in e-commerce space, nowadays for many brands, doesn't work for all brands. If you're going to re-platform, you look really hard at Shopify, and the thinking is, geez, you don't get fired for selecting Shopify. You didn't select Shopify. Talk about that decision.
Yeah, so I wanted to build something, like I mentioned, that was really modular and easy for my partners in product and marketing to test and learn new tactics and functionality and vendors, right? So I wanted to build a composable or headless site that gave us the ability to just plug something in, test it. If it works, great. If it's not, we can rip it out, plug something else in. You don't get that with Shopify. I mean, technically it's possible, but it's much easier for what I had chosen for the platform, which is Salesforce backend and then Vercel front end.
Would you say that that tech stack is an anomaly, different than what most are doing today?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I had a actually had a session at NRF where I talked about how I built this with Salesforce and Vercel, and I had a lot of brands approach me much bigger than us that were interested in how I did it. To my knowledge, there isn't many that have done it this way, and they're again much bigger than us at Hanna. So if I think of brands that are similar, you think of Tapestry, Under Armour, Sonos. There's not many of them, right? But good company to be in for a brand our size, right? We're building things that, in my mind, allow our friends on the marketing side to just really grow this brand as big as we want, and we have the infrastructure to handle it.
The devil is in the details. You probably have heard that phrase time and time again in your professional life. Projects get started with great intentions, but you no longer have the time to pay attention to the little things that could make the difference between success and failure. At Details Interactive, you can discuss your business with a seasoned direct to consumer marketing executive who's helped launch and grow web businesses and integrate multi channel marketing initiatives. Learn more at detailsinteractive.com. So interesting, and maybe not specific to Hannah, but how does one in your role go in and sell to your leadership, whether it's private equity, whether it's family owned, whoever owns the business? How do you pitch producing something, creating, wanting to do something like you did that's kind of an outlier?
Yeah, it's really the outcomes, right? Like understanding that, like, hey, we want to grow this business. We're going to build something that is going to far outgrow what we'd be able to do if we just replatform to Shopify, like a monolith. And that was the main catalyst, right? Like I have the ability to test and learn everything I want. I can throw as much traffic as I want to this, and it will handle it. And that was very appealing, right? Because then the sky's the limit. We can with enough tactics and budget, we can grow this brand to the moon.
How's your structure or here or in elsewhere? You know, you've got the engineering side, you've got the marketing side. What's that bridge between the two? You know, the marketers have a feature or functionality that they want to execute. How do they communicate that with you and your team to get done what they would like?
I think it's different in every brand, right? Like we have here we have separate engineering marketing teams where like at Pet Supermarket it was a little unique where I owned both from an e-com perspective. But here we have a traditional product org that I have as a peer, and they come up with ideas for the roadmap with our CDO, and then we collaborate with them to say like, yes, we can do it the way you outlined. No, we have to do this a little differently. Yes, this is going to take longer than we thought. Right. So just that collaboration is so important because if you don't have that, it makes it really difficult to deliver things on time.
Site speed, obviously something that, many brands take, really seriously. But how fast do you need to be?
That's a great question. I think I actually have a LinkedIn post on this I posted recently. There's a point of diminishing returns where the site is not that being too fast hurts you, but it's not really something you should have as a goal. I personally think that if you're at or under 3 seconds, and there's a lot of nuance to that, but that's a good way to look at it. And site speed is so important. This is like I look at it like as a foundational element of your e-commerce site that no matter what you do, if your site's slow, it doesn't matter. So there could be all these things out there with AI and different, vendors. There's a million things you could try out there, but if you have 4 or 5 second load times on mobile, like why does that matter? Your customer is most likely going to bounce.
3 seconds defined from beginning to end of what processes?
Yeah, so that's load time on every template on the page. So homepage, cart, PDP, checkout, PLP. Again, there's lots of nuance with Core Web Vitals, right? There's probably 4 or 5 different metrics that I track that make up site speed, and that's how we get really surgical of how we approach it and fix it and improve it. But especially when I talk to the business, we talk about site speed. That's an easy metric to understand, and that's the benchmark that we set for ourselves with our new site. It's got to be under 3 seconds, and many times it's much faster than that.
You talk about diminishing returns. So does that mean that in fact you've figured out beyond or below a certain load time, let's say 3 seconds, it doesn't pay to invest any more engineering brain cells to get below that?
Yes, there is. I have a vendor called Yotta, Yottaa, that I use to like orchestrate how things are loading and manipulate that to get better site speed. And they have a concept of like a zone that you fit in that is your like your sweet spot, right? So we found that anything under 1.5 seconds, it really didn't affect conversion. It didn't really matter as much. Sure, you want to get as fast as possible, but we're not looking to optimize anything at that point on that specific template or page or whatever you want to call it. We're only looking to maintain the gains that we have, that they stay under 3 seconds.
So you mentioned AI. What's your sense, at this point in time? We're recording this in early April 2026. Is AI overhyped, underhyped? How are you leveraging it in your day to day?
Yeah, I think there are definitely situations where it's overhyped. I think we're all feeling that. I use it every day for, personal and professional testing, experimentation, learning. I love using it for learning. There's a lot of prompts that I have in my personal learning journeys where I like to try to get like 80% of a concept that will get me, most of the understanding of a topic, and that's been really great to accelerate learning because I always try to spend my time learning about new technology, new concepts, right? And professionally, you still have to have the same kind of structure and rigor around data that you need to have over the last few decades to make anything with AI work for you. It only becomes powerful once the data layer is reliable. And I still feel like a lot of brands out there are struggling with that. There's so many data points, and some of them conflict with each other. And if you don't get that cleaned up, then none of these AI tools are really going to matter.
I see so many brands that really don't have a source of truth. They wind up spending so much time triangulating sources of data. How do you help your brand, think about and giving them that source of truth?
As you get into enterprise commerce, there is a lot of different data points. I think looking at where all the data lives, and like you have analytics, you have e-com platforms, you have CRM, you have marketing platforms, having a system to aggregate and push that data where it needs to go, sometimes dynamically, is how you can keep up with that at the enterprise level. That way, when your numbers are not siloed, right, your teams are not debating the numbers. We're using those numbers to learn and solve problems and grow. It's so important as you grow.
And that brings up what we like to talk about here as the A word, attribution. We tried not to talk about it too much, but in a conversation like this, you can't help it. Tell us about attribution and how you think about it. You're the technology guy, not necessarily the marketing guy, but, does it bleed into your world as well?
Especially how we're measuring it, right? Like that's so important to understand attribution and making sure that the data signals that we have are real, like what actually influenced the customer to convert. There really isn't a perfect answer to that. I think to me, it's just making sure your data is clean, because if we don't really understand our attribution, we don't trust the data, then it's hard to make decisions on strategy and tactics.
And here I thought you were going to give me the answer that nobody else has been able to give me, Matt. We have listeners, to this show, senior people, seasoned people, but I find more and more that there are people earlier in their career that are listening to the show, which is fantastic. But for those that are early in their career and they're trying to figure out what direction, how does the intersection of technology and marketing, what should they be focusing on to kind of give them both sides of the perspective?
I think it's just being curious about how these businesses tick. Early in my career, I was more on the technology side, but again, what I talked about earlier, like I wanted to understand why we're doing what we're set out to do, right? Sometimes it just did make sense. And so I wanted to understand the business fundamentals, even though it wasn't part of my job at the time. Like I wanted to learn data, like why does data matter? Why does analytics matter? Where are we getting that data from? The most important thing I think is communication skills, like being able to translate back and forth. I think the old way of referring to that is like a solutions architect, right? Understanding how to interpret technical requirements or information and communicate that to a business and back and forth. That is still very, very valuable. And I think as we get further into the AI world, that becomes even more valuable. It's not a common skill that I found out, but it's something I've personally leaned into. I saw it as a gap in, I think, a lot of people's skill sets, and I tried to fill that gap, and I think it served me really well in my career.
Yeah, I think curiosity. We talk about three key takeaways that we can give people to take back to their personal and professional lives, and curiosity is really an important characteristic to have because it's just hard to learn unless you're curious. Great stuff. You've had a really interesting career, lots of good success. So thanks for doing the show with me. We're down to the 2-minute drill, 7 questions, 1-word answer. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. A brand that you admire or that inspires you?
Tapestry.
Favorite app on your phone?
Slack.
Last website other than Amazon that you shopped from?
Ooh, Rogue Fitness.
Something that you're not good at but wish that you were?
Golf.
Join the club. Charitable organization that you're passionate about?
Humane Society. Love animals.
If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Time travel.
Other than family, what's your most prized possession?
My digital notebook. I started in 2012, and I have every meeting, every thought there I can reference back to. I couldn't live without it.
When I asked you yesterday about your bio, you told me it was in your digital notebook. I was going to ask you about that. We'll have to talk about that digital notebook, the life of Matt Ezyk on digital. That's great. Matt, where can people reach out to you on social media should they have an interest in doing so?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best place. You can find me there. I post a lot of these topics that we talked about there and love sharing and connecting with people. So please reach out.
Yeah, Matt's really good at connecting. He posts great content. I've learned a lot from him and really appreciate your thought leadership that you've provided. So, Matt, great opportunity to chat. Really appreciate talking to you.
Thank you.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Matt Ezyk for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, the future of e-commerce is flexible, not fixed. The brands that win are building modular, API-first tech stacks that allow them to test, learn, and iterate quickly, not ones locked into rigid platforms that limit growth. And number 2, great partners solve problems. They don't just pitch. The best vendors take the time to understand your business, communicate clearly, and tie everything back to measurable outcomes. That's what separates real partners from all the noise. And number 3, AI is powerful, but data is still everything. You can have the best tools in the world, but without clean data and proper attribution, none of it works. Strong data foundations are still the key to making smarter decisions and driving growth. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.